Hi everybody, my name is Megan Peterson. I am a senior at Upper Iowa University. I am originally from Superior, Wisconsin, which is actually where I'm at right now, celebrating the 4th of July weekend with my family. And I am going to be presenting my senior project. I am a psychology major, and this project is very near and dear to my heart, as it has always been a goal of mine to someday work at the VA somewhere, hopefully in the Milwaukee area, to help the men and women that have helped and protected us for hundreds of years. My senior project is mostly going to focus on the veterans from the war in Iraq, just due to my age, and it is the war that I have really only known, obviously. It is the war of my generation, and I am going to be and have been working with men and women who have fought. I decided to choose this topic not only because of my professional life, but my personal life. I currently have a cousin that is serving overseas. He has done 8 tours, and I had a brother that served as well, and he suffered the effects of PTSD very, very gravely, and he ultimately ended up taking his own life due to his complications when it came to PTSD. So this topic has obviously always been very near and dear to my heart, and it is a topic that I hope to research more beyond this senior project and really make a difference. And that is my ultimate goal. That has been my motivating factor through these 8 weeks to get through. I think it is important to research something that you are completely invested in and want to research, because it makes these 20 pages a lot easier. And researching this is definitely going to help me. Not only in my personal life has this research helped me, but it will more so help me in my professional life, which is what we are all here for, to gain knowledge through our senior project, to go on hopefully for our master's, which is my goal, to go into social work so I can really make a difference. So I am excited to share my senior project with you guys. I have simply just labeled it Veterans and PTSD. I think that name says what it needs to. So next slide. I apologize. It is sunny in Superior, Wisconsin, which it never is. So what is PTSD? It is post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder usually occurs when an event or a situation happens to one, and the effects can be immediate, or you can live a long time, and all of a sudden you can start to have flashbacks and night terrors and anxiety, and the brain is not equipped to handle trauma, and our brains try to protect us, and it does not always work, and your brain and your body are not always in sync, and so your brain can be trying to protect one from what happened, and your body and your brain, like I said, are just not working together. Obviously, the war in Iraq has been going on for over 15 years. 2.7 million troops have gone over to fight the war in Iraq. That is from Watson in 2018, just to cite. And so that is 2.7 million men and women who have seen the unimaginable, seen their friends pass away, seen people, citizens, things that no person should have to see. So our brains, like I stated before, try to protect us, but it is not, especially when in combat, our brains just aren't they just don't know how to handle what has happened. A lot of individuals who do make it home have what we call survivor's guilt. They feel guilty for surviving when their friends did not make it home. A lot of, and sorry, that just went dark. There we go. And a lot of veterans have the flashbacks of what happened, the night terrors. They have a lot of anger, and I'm sorry, and they a lot of times isolate themselves. A lot of veterans go through depression because, like I said, the survivor's guilt or what they saw. The motto of the military is often leave no man behind, so that is where a lot of times that survivor's guilt comes in. They felt as though they did not do their job. So my question, my thesis was, as a country, are our men and women in the military being left behind? Are the men and women of the United States military getting the necessary treatment, counseling, and access to the resources that they need and that they deserve? So I really focused on the stigma that is often felt by the members of the military. Obviously, I personally do not understand that as someone who has not been in the military, but I can obviously do my due diligence of researching that to see not only what the stigma is that they feel like they face, but the stigma that we also as a society place on these men and women. Obviously, there has been a lot of backlash to the VA regarding treatment, access to treatment, and times that it takes an individual to get in. I focused on current treatment and new treatment as well, which is always interesting because with PTSD, there is a lot of new treatments that can come out, and that is also something that I focused on. So I went through that. And obviously my biggest part of my conclusion was what can be done and what needs to be done. And I think there are a lot of things that can do. Obviously there is no cure for PTSD, and PTSD does affect everybody differently. Some people can have mild cases of PTSD and live a very normal functioning life and do their jobs and go to work. And oftentimes other people cannot, and they do not know how to handle the effects that PTSD has. And ultimately, individuals can end up taking their lives, and unfortunately it does happen too often. So obviously I went over why are veterans more likely to suffer from the effects of PTSD, just because of the combat and everything that they go through. They are brought to a new place where they have never been before. They are away from their families. They are in a new environment. Although they're with, their platoons and everything, it is still not normal in a not normal environment, and then place combat in that, and your brain does not know how to react. And then place again veterans back into society, and again we just expect them to just come back and everything be like it was. I obviously found some pretty interesting photos. This one is a man obviously in his combat gear, but it also has words that makes up into his uniform, which is fairly interesting. We know men and women of the military are the bravest individuals, but we sometimes do not look at them as human, which is a lot of the problem as well. So what are the stigmas associated with getting help for PTSD? We have a lot of stigmas associated. Like I stated before, sorry, this keeps flipping. Obviously, our men and women in military, like I stated before, are the bravest of the brave. And with that comes stereotypes, unfortunately. So stigmas that our own men and women in military face is one of the biggest, I don't want to say issues by any means, because it's just common, and it's something that they fear. Most veterans do not want to be labeled. They don't want to be labeled as violent. They don't want to be labeled as crazy. A lot of veterans blame themselves for having PTSD, which is a stigma right there. They believe that if they could have done something differently, they could have helped the situation that they were in. Obviously, many veterans believe that they need to be tough all the time, that they cannot put their guard down, that they do not deserve to put their guard down, that they just have to deal with it. And they just don't want to be looked at or treated any differently. A lot of veterans do not believe that there is any treatment for PTSD, that they just have to deal with it or rely on their family, which is also not the case. As I will get to later on, there are many programs for veterans, not enough, but there are still many that do offer help for veterans. Through my research, many soldiers are afraid that if they get treatment for PTSD, it will show up on their file and it will somehow affect their military career, which is something that we need to, and the military needs to, really hone down on that is not going to affect. Many men and women in the military do care about their public appearance of them. You see a man or woman in, their military uniform, and you thank them for their service because how brave they were. And many men and women do not want to be looked at any differently than that. Dr. Harold Cudler, who is the chief consultant for mental health services of the Department of Veterans Affairs, said the most important thing to remove the stigma from PTSD is for people to talk about it. But then when talking about it, not to fall into stereotypes. For people who have PTSD, they're at risk for depression, for substance abuse, they're at high risk for suicide, largely because of the nature of PTSD. To think about the world and yourself in negative terms and the idea that nothing could ever go right. So when we think about that, we think about all the men and women have been over there and who have lost and who have what they have seen. And then we come back and we do not talk about it. And what Dr. Harold Cudler is saying is that we need to start talking about it. The more we talk about it, the more these men and women in uniform will feel like it is okay to also talk about it. And that is what we need to do. We need to remove the stigma and the pop culture for members in the military, that we presume them to be the toughest, the bravest, which they are. The ones who raise their hand to say, I will fight for all of you. And within that, though, like I stated, these men and women feel, and they need to be known that it is okay to get help. And if we, like I stated, if we all talk about it, then they will feel like they can talk about it. Like they feel like they will come home and they can get help, and there's not going to be anyone judging them or any consequences for them getting help as well. And I think that is very vital. We need to hold them accountable in a way for their mental health, and I think that will allow them not to hinder themselves for when getting treatment. I think the biggest thing in my research really has been to educate and to give seminars about education and substance abuse before veterans even go overseas. It's been looked at in my research that we spend so much time with other members of society and children talking about mental health illness, and that stuff is getting better, but it seems like it has not yet gotten exactly better when it comes to veterans. So that is something that we definitely need to change to end the stigma. This is also a very interesting cartoon that I found. It's just obviously a grenade, and it's ticking, and his friend is saying, "Great to have you home," when in reality he just feels like he could go off at any second. We often don't know, sometimes I believe, obviously how it is. So I think it is hard for others who are not in the military to, I think we feel awkward and we can't, we just need to break that stigma. And so, like I said, the mental health mandatory education, making mental health a priority. I think that would really make veterans feel like, hey, this is okay because the military backs it. What are the problems veterans face when trying to get help for PTSD? I think the biggest thing in my research that I've looked up is the problems with location and access. Many veterans have to travel to get help from Veterans Affairs. It's often not convenient for them. Data showed, in 2013 was the earliest that I could find, 47,700 veterans have to wait longer than 2 weeks to get into mental health counseling. That was from Zeroya. And in larger cities, often, obviously, because you have a larger veterans population, the wait time is even more. The VA states that they have a goal of seeing patients within 14 days, a goal that is not always reached. Obviously, we know there has been, which is not part of my research, but we do know that the VA has had problems getting veterans in to see them. And so there was a big one in Colorado Springs, and they found that the VA clinic in Colorado Springs was falsely reporting some information about veterans and care. They stated that veterans got quicker care there, but really in actuality 350 of their patients had to wait longer than a month, and in another 240 patients never got any help that they needed. We have 820 community-based clinics that serve the United States, which I do not believe that is enough, especially when you are thinking of all the veterans that are still around, just not even the veterans from the war in Iraq, but we still obviously have other veterans that need help as well. So that is definitely an issue. So we need to have the resources. Obviously, the stigma is also a problem when veterans are trying to get help. They don't feel like they deserve the help that are needed. I put another interesting cartoon, if you can see it. It's just a soldier going home, and which direction, the post-traumatic stress, depression, violent behavior, or to go back to overseas again. Current treatment options, the VA on their website really uses the cognitive therapy, which is a great excuse me, I'm just trying to roll down, which is a great therapy to use. Obviously, that is what many people have used for a long time. Cognitive therapy has been used for years, and it's used by teaching your brain how to kind of retrain your thoughts and how one feels about a situation. So when, a veteran has a flashback or lightning strikes, your brain, they're trying to teach your brain to think of that differently, not as the situation that they were in, but the situation that they are now in, that they're safe, and so that their brain knows that they're safe. Prolonged exposure is also treatment for PTSD that is used frequently. This teaches veterans to slowly remember the events, because veterans who have those events would be avoiding the events. So that is also how PTSD, they've been pushed so far back in the memory that they kind of try to forget, but the PTSD still allows them to come out in certain situations. So they come out in full force almost. And so we're trying with the prolonged exposure to kind of bring those thoughts and come to terms with those thoughts. Medicating veterans is also obviously a form of treatment that is commonly used. Antidepressants are often used, which many veterans also don't want to use those because of the side effects. So that is obviously something that they do not like. There are sexual side effects, erectile dysfunction. Many veterans see taking medication as a weakness as well. A lot of the medications themselves can cause suicidal ideations that are on the side of the bottle. And it was interesting because Senator John McCain on September 28th of 2017 actually introduced the veterans. Sorry, this was from Rand in 2018. He didn't introduce it in 2018. Senator John McCain, he introduced the Veterans Over Medication Prevention Act to prevent over medication of veterans to combat with suicide, which is really interesting. Obviously because of the side effects that can occur with the depressants. Since there are so many risks with the medications and prescription pills and getting addicted to prescription pills, and obviously the side effects and can often lead to suicide, many veterans are looking for different ways to cope with PTSD. There was a study by Rand as well that in 2018 that 116 veterans underwent mindfulness-based stress reduction therapy that focused on the present, not the president, and non-judgmental. So they were more in a centered group therapy that focused on current life problems. So therefore also they're in a group setting, so which reduces the stigma, so they feel, like they belong in that situation. Technology, there's a new technology also which is really interesting. It's called NeuroFlow, which is uses measurements from the brain and heart to generate readings of a veteran's stress level, engagement, and relaxation. So a lot of veterans are unable to exactly see what their exact trigger is. So a therapist would be able to monitor those levels while the patient is talking in their sessions, which is really interesting. And the therapist can take notes, and so therefore with that mindfulness, that NeuroFlow, that therapist would be able to see exactly where the trigger is and then work on that, which would be really interesting. Another one is researchers are really looking closely at inhibitory neurotransmitter gamma aminobutyric acid, which other ways I'll call gamma. So which is really interesting. The GABA and glutamate play a role in encoding fear memories. So a researcher we're going to be researching that more and see if that is a better option than, say, antidepressant, which is really kind of interesting. At least I thought. And then also, with everything going on current event-wise, obviously cannabis has been found to reduce PTSD symptoms in some patients. And from RAND, one study indicated that patients reported an average of 75% reduction in PTSD symptoms while using cannabis. Again, some people don't agree with that, but research shows that some people are obviously benefiting from it. So that is a treatment option. So I guess what can be done and what needs to be done. That's where my research comes to an end, and that is where I put in my 2 cents. And I believe what needs to be done, there are many programs, there are many nonprofit programs that have been provided for men and women in the military that have been helpful, which is great. But I believe that our military system needs to do more. Obviously with the stigma, if we do the mental health training beforehand, if we do the education beforehand, if we do all the information that one needs, I believe that stigma will end, and that people, men and women in the military, will feel like they can come home to a support group, not just their families, and not just rely on their families. I know they have support with each other, but I just believe that as a society and as an organization that the military can do more. I think that a social worker and I know it's a lot, but I think a social worker for every member of the military deployed would be something that is interesting and would be something that would be beneficial. I believe that when men and women in the military come home, I think a mandatory counseling would be something that would also reduce stigma, because everyone would be getting it, so people who really needed the counseling wouldn't feel singled out, and everybody would benefit in a way from that. I think that would be really beneficial. So I think that the education, along with the extra support and the treatment, there's nothing wrong with preventative treatment. We believe preventative treatment is beneficial in every other aspect. You go to the dentist for preventative. You go to the doctor, for a physical, for preventative. So why aren't we trying to prevent the consequences that occur with mental health? Especially when one is going, overseas and often involved in situations that nobody else would ever be involved in. And these men and women are choosing to do it day in and day out. So I think preventative treatment is key. And I think follow-up is key. And more resources is key. And that is why I believe my research is so important, and I think that there needs to be something done. Something really interesting that I actually came along with, and I'll end with this, an article written by Dale Harris in the Duluth News Tribune, which is where I am from and currently around. It's called the Veterans Treatment Court, and this was founded in 2008 in Buffalo, New York. And since then, there has been 300 courts all over the United States. And this court allows veterans to gain access, and they participate, but they must abide by the rules that the court sets up. They must follow sobriety, curfew, therapy appointments that have been set up for them at no cost to them. The court gives them tools to succeed, find homes, jobs, and provide resources. But like I said, it also holds them accountable to be successful in that program. They're assigned a mentor, so they can, have someone to talk to. I believe this is a great program because many veterans are used to discipline and strive in a disciplinary setting. So obviously there are consequences if you do not follow the rules, things like writing an essay, verbal correction, but even a short jail time. And those actions are obviously used for them to know that they're serious, and a motivating force to drive those veterans to complete the program. I believe that a program like that could be extremely beneficial for men and women in the military to kind of get on their feet after everything is happening, and if they are feeling the effects of PTSD. I thank you for your time and listening to me. This is obviously a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and thank you guys very much.